Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, apologies for being a little bit behind schedule on this video, but we are here nonetheless. I have with me the awesome Lauren Steiner. Lauren Steiner, how are you doing today? And please tell them the name of your network, because I know you have at least two. I can't think of the name of the show, but I know you have a show on YouTube. What is the name of the show, just so people know where to find you?
Well, my show is called The Robust Opposition. So
That's
thank you for having me on. And I do the show on Facebook Live using the Be Live platform. And I've sort of been on hiatus most of the summer, but I'm going to be coming back. And I then usually edit all my shows as well as my live streams in the field. I cover a lot of events, forums, protests, rallies, and edit them sometimes and then put them on my YouTube channel, which you could put in YouTube/Lauren from LA, or just search Lauren Steiner and you will find me.
very cool. Very cool. So there's been big news that's been going on today. I mean, so one of the items that's come up, censorship. We're going to do three items. So censorship, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez being attacked, a World Socialist website, assiduously attacked, continuously, eternally. They wake up in the morning, they hit her once before going to bed. And the last one, the identity politics one about Kamala Harris. So let's dig into the censorship one first. Alex Jones, as you know, Alex Jones, the guy who screams about lizards at times, has had his entire site shut down on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Essentially all across, and Spotify. Across the digital platform chain, the ability for him to be able to communicate with an audience. Mind you, he still has his page on the internet itself, but the capacity of him to be able to talk to people in an easy way has for the most part been decapitated across the board. Like that's relatively amazing. It's not just Alex Jones, however. Alex Jones is just the big, I guess you can say, the main one that we've known about today. Some of the sites that you put up on your Facebook page deals with Palestinians. I'm sorry if I'm blinking. I've just put in eye drops and they're screwing with my way of looking at the camera or looking at the lighting. The one that you put up dealing with, I guess my point is, it's not just Alex Jones. So let's take a look at this. This is your page that you have. And let's flip this to a screen share so everyone can see.
Yeah, let's just, to go back a little bit, you know, I contacted you yesterday. And I asked you if you wanted to get on the air and talk to me about this, because I didn't want to make another live stream on my own, because I just did that yesterday about these bills that we have to fight in the California legislature. So this kind of thing I wanted to do as a conversation with somebody who I know would think like me, another independent journalist. And what moved me to do this was when I found out about this news yesterday. There's some comedian by the name of God. He has a Facebook page called God, and he had this shot of Alex Jones just disappearing.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that.
Something about Donald Trump, save me, or whatever it was. And I posted on there, I hope people on the extreme left are not cheering about this, because they're going to be coming from us next.
Yes.
And I was shocked to find the responses that I got. Yes, there were, I would say the majority of my friends and followers agreed with me, but there were actually people on the left that did not care that Alex Jones was shut down, and they said it's hate speech. They said it's a private company. It's not the government.
They became free marketeers all of a sudden. They became, these lefties became right wingers. It's a free market, buddy. It's a private enterprise. You can shut down whoever you want. I love that. I love that.
They literally gave all sorts of arguments why it was okay. And, you know, the whole thing about the First Amendment, and I actually studied the First Amendment. I was actually thinking in college for a short while that I might become a First Amendment attorney. And I took a class in mass media law, and I'm going to date myself now. It was the summer after my sophomore year at Stanford University. And I took this class. I got an A+. It was amazing because it was a law school class. And I'm so proud of myself that I got an A+ when I was only like 19 or however old I was. But I remember studying about the First Amendment and how important the First Amendment was. And then the following summer was 1978. I was actually doing an internship at WBZ, the Westinghouse affiliate in Boston. And you don't have Westinghouse anymore because it's one of the smaller media companies that got consolidated after Bill Clinton's, he
Media
deregulated the media
consolidation.
in
Yeah.
1996, which made it possible for Clear Channel to buy hundreds of stations and put Rush Limbaugh on all of them. But back then you still had multiple media companies. And I was working in the newsroom that summer when the Nazis, the American Nazi Party, wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois, which is a suburb of Illinois, and it happens to be home to a lot of Holocaust survivors. And I'm sure this is 1977. I'm sure many of them are dead now. But I remember that the ACLU came forward to defend the American Nazi Party's right to march in Skokie because of the principle of our Constitution, of our First Amendment, that it is free speech, and who is to decide what is good speech and what is bad speech? So unless it's a category of speech that is not protected by the First Amendment, such as libel or defamation or incitement to violence, which is shouting, the classic example they use in law school is shouting fire in a crowded theater, which will cause everybody to run for the hills and trample each other, then you cannot censor. Or pornography. And even pornography was up to, I forget which justice said, I can't define it, but I know it when I
But I know
see
it
it.
when I see it. Yeah.
So what we were saying back in that day, and what I then said when I then became, my first career was to manage a public access cable television facility. And people would say to me, well, what if the Ku Klux Klan came to you and they wanted to sponsor one of their hateful programs? Would you allow it on? And I would say, well, first of all, the Ku Klux Klan would have to have a local sponsor in Lexington, Massachusetts. Otherwise, we could not air their program.
Right.
But if it did, I would not censor it. What I would do is I would contact a civil rights organization and I would notify them of the program, and I would have them in the studio immediately following to do a reaction. Because as is said, the only counter to bad speech is good speech. So rather than censor it, you have all voices out there in what they call the competing marketplace of ideas, and you let the public decide, what they want to listen to, what seems right and reasonable to them. Now, the problem is right now with these people, they're saying, oh, Alex Jones says all these hateful things. He is inciting people to violence. I want to make the point that a lot of this has to do with critical thinking skills. If people are not able to discern that this man is an entertainer, his own wife said it in the divorce case. He's got this brand, he's got this persona that he wants to sell. If they can't discern that, because they have critical thinking skills, which, are going by the wayside now with privatized education and charter schools. They don't teach you to think critically and question authority. No, they teach you to follow directions so you could be, obedient workers and, compliant consumers.
That's
So,
not just private school, that's also public school.
well, this is charter schools, which are taking over public schools. That's the problem.
No, I mean, even in Richmond, I mean, I guess this is besides the point, but I guess I'm saying all societies, for the most part, teach their kids to essentially conform to the measures of the society itself, whether that's public or private. I understand your point. You're trying to make the point that private schools do it in order to create robots. I'm saying public schools, to some degree, do the same. I don't necessarily. It's besides the point. Let's go past.
Well, yeah, public charters are private schools because they're privately run, but that I'll talk to you about this offline. The other thing that I want to make is morality. Now, if you're taught morality by and I think the first place you need to be taught by morality by is your family, or if you maybe are a religious person and you go to religious school, then you know right from wrong, and you know that you're not going to beat up on people whose skin color is different from yours, or whose country of origin is different from yours, or whose sexual preference is different from yours. So there's a whole bunch of factors in the systemic problem right now that cause Alex Jones to possibly be believed by people, possibly people actually go do what he says. But the answer to that is not to censor him, because then what you end up doing is you censor any other voice that you think is doing the same thing. Like they're censoring Palestinian journalists. They're censoring Palestinian activists. And those were the things that somebody made a montage of screenshots from all these different publications and posted it, and I tagged you in it because it showed how these people are being censored. And I even on my own site, which was recently monetized, which I could care less about because I got $2.38 in the entire month of July. uh, but my own site, the only thing that they demonetized, that they didn't have ads on because they said they were limited advertiser appeal,
Yeah.
was 3 programs I did about Israel, Palestine, and 1 program that I did about the homeless marching, a march for a homeless shelter in Koreatown. So when I looked up, the little question mark, what is unsuitable for advertisers? It basically said controversial subject matter, political subject matter. Well, that's everything I do.
That's
Everything
everything in
I
the
do is
news. Yeah.
controversial and political. So, why did they pick that? And why are they deleting Israel Palestine? Might it have to do with the influence of AIPAC and Bibi Netanyahu? They talk about Russia and Putin having control over our government. I would contend that Israel has more control over our government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'm
So,
showing the montage of the different videos that have been blocked. Essentially, the Palestinian videos, or videos that were put up by Palestinians, or channels, or Facebook pages that were taken down. I'm going through. There's so many of these, inciting or deterring YouTube forces or to shut down Palestinian media watch. I tried to make the point that just because you're pro-Palestinian doesn't necessarily mean you're anti-Jewish. There's a difference in those things. You could be pro-Palestinian, but not necessarily racist or anti-Semitic. The conflation that takes place with this, however, is in order to stem speech or to stop speech criticizing Israel, making this conflation itself that a criticism of Israel is somehow anti-Semitic. It's a nonsense conflation, but the conflation is made nonetheless. The Facebook labels Palestinian journalism hate speech. Think about that. Think about
yeah.
that. Palestinians label Facebook labels Palestinian journalism hate speech. And again, you get back to this point, who decides? Who decides? Like,
Well,
and
the
by the way, this is not a decision that's made in a democratic way. This is a decision made by a corporation deciding we don't like this type of speech. Mind you, they may be pushed from a governmental source, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's 1% unelected bodies making a determination on what's free speech. Now,
but
to your credit, you were making the argument that despite this being a corporation, First Amendment applies. Now, why? Explain this. I've heard someone else make this argument, and if I'm not mistaken, Twitter was put to court over this. Is that right? Twitter went to court over this, over whether or not the First Amendment applies to essentially their platform. And maybe I'm talking out my ass on this. I could have swore
Well,
they did.
I don't know about the Twitter court case, and I don't think there's any court case that proves what I contend. But what I contend is that with Matt Taibbi in his article showing that 70% of Americans get their news from Facebook and Google, they have replaced the public square. So
Yes.
they are a public forum. And there is a law that I was telling you about in California called Pruneyard versus the state of California. And this was about a shopping center where somebody wanted to make a speech or solicit for a candidate, and they were told, no, this is a privately owned shopping center, mall, or whatever. You can't be here. They took them to court, and they won. They said that this may be privately owned, but it's public access. Anyone could come to this mall, and therefore you could not restrict free speech. However, you were allowed to have what they call time, place, and manner restrictions. In other words, you can protest, but you have to be in this corner of the mall. You can only do it from 10 a.m. to noon, and you can't use a loudspeaker. So that kind of restriction, time, place, and manner, does not restrict based on content.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about right now is restrictions based on content. And I would contend that you cannot, they can call themselves privately owned, and the progressives who are supporting this decision can call themselves privately owned. But I would contend that they are operating now as the largest news aggregator. And when they censor and keep off this speech, they are doing a disservice for having multiple voices. I mean, the whole First Amendment, the whole reason that the press was called the fourth estate, if you will, the fourth branch of government, is because in a democracy, what you're supposed to have is this marketplace, and I know that's sort of an economic term, but this marketplace of ideas competing in the democracy, and citizens take what they want and they use that information to make decisions in a democratic society. If the information that you're only giving them comes from one source, the government, and I would contend, and Caitlin Johnson would contend as well, because she says, and I want to read the quote that she says in her article. She says, in a corporatist system of government wherein there is no meaningful separation between corporate power and state power, corporate censorship is state censorship because legalized bribery in the form of corporate lobbying and campaign donations has given wealthy Americans the ability to control the U.S. government's policy and behavior, while ordinary Americans have no effective influence whatsoever. The U.S. unquestionably has a corporatist system of government. Large, influential corporations are inseparable from the state, so their use of censorship is inseparable from state censorship. And I think she makes a very good argument. And then you have, Mark Warner. This was a quote in, is it the quote at the beginning of her article or Matt Taibbi's article?
Let me see. I know the quote
Do you have that? Why don't you find that quote? Because I think it was in Matt Taibbi's article. Because this is what's really dangerous.
No, this was in World Socialist website. No, I know what you're talking about.
Representatives of Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter came before Congress last year, and they were instructed to quell the information rebellion, so as preventing a fomenting of discord. Okay, fomenting of discord. Okay, that we have to unpack that statement, because discord is actually what makes the world go round. You have a point of view, I have a point of view, we disagree, and we talk it out. If you're just giving one point of view, it becomes the party line. It becomes like 1984. It becomes state propaganda. It becomes like Stalinist, Russia. It's everything that we're supposedly against when we talk about, trying to equate Russia and Putin with communism, which it isn't even communist anymore. It's a kleptocracy, just like, the USA. So I feel like, and then the final thing that I want to say is that these organizations, Facebook, Google, Twitter, and thankfully Twitter is not listening. They were the only ones who did not suspend Alex Jones. They are getting their information from the Atlantic Council, which is a neocon organization. And on the board of that is Henry Kissinger, Michael Hayden, Mike Morrell, and Michael Chertoff. All these people are CIA, These are spooks. These are neocons. And they are the ones who the technology companies are listening to decide what is, to be allowed for 70% of the American people to see. I mean, this is scary stuff here.
That's amazing thing that you just said. 70% of the American public, essentially 70% of the American traffic between Google and Facebook, I believe, get their news from Google and Facebook, between those two sources. And I guess the question becomes, like you said, it is state power, and not just state power. It's two political parties taking a craven power grab. Ultimately, you have an anti-establishment, you could say, upswell. You can say both sides feel they're being assailed. Donald Trump walked to the White House. Republicans hate the fact that Donald Trump walked to the White House. Democrats hate it that much more. So they consider this to be outside the confines of what they consider to be status quo or the norm, or the very least has been the norm for the past 20 years. How do you stop that? How do I prevent that from taking place? The media is a captured audience. The problem is, to some degree, the internet. So you have all of these sources where people have been getting their information, 70% of which, how do I tamp down on those sources of information? You bring them to Congress and you browbeat the devil out of them. And not just browbeat them, you make it as if there's a Russian threat and you need to do something about that Russian threat. In that article that you're talking about for World Socialist website, they go so far to say, you all understand that your job here goes beyond just being a platform. That's an amazing statement. I mean, your job is being more than just a free marketeer. Your job is to essentially help us, the government, quell certain speech and to maintain order. I thought that was an amazing statements in that document. I need to find the document. I did a video on that because of some of the quotes that were in that document. It was absolutely amazing. Here it is. But yeah, World Socialist website. It's an amazing. The question becomes, what do you do about it? I mean, is it a situation where those systems are nationalized, or is it a situation where, which is what I put forth? I mean, and I put this forth only because I don't necessarily know how those systems will get nationalized from where we are.
Yeah.
Bill of Rights. I mean, ultimately, what we're talking about is free speech rights in a corporate space, where a corporation, for the most part, just like they can't turn me away for being an African American, they can't turn somebody away within that particular arena. Um, I don't think it's crazy. I mean, the moment that you make the case that says, well, you can't turn a person away for being black, or you can't turn a person away for being Chinese, then you've already said, or you set the precedent that the business itself can't necessarily make all the rules of its interaction. Meaning, the moment it opens up a shop, it says we're open for business, that there are certain constraints that are being put on the fact that a person is open for business. One of those, you can't exclude people on the basis of color. I suspect that expanding that to some degree into the digital sphere that goes into, yes, of course, you can't eject people of color because color is almost irrelevant from the standpoint of the internet. But speech and rhetoric is not. Speech and rhetoric is not.
You know, one idea that somebody posted in my page as a comment on my page is that every piece should be defined by the author. Well, I don't know if the author can define it, but fact or opinion.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in school, kids are taught to try to discern the source that they're reading. Like if it's a primary source, if it's a secondary source, who is saying it? Are they coming from an organization that is paying them to say it? I mean, I'll never forget during the Obama administration when he was actually ready to put cuts to entitlements on the table.
Yeah.
He had that cat food commission, which is what it was called, because if their recommendations got passed, senior citizens would go back to eating cat food. It was the Simpson-Bowles Commission, and Alan
I
Simpson
remember
was a
that.
crazy right-wing senator from Wyoming, former senator, and Erskine Bowles was a Clinton DLC, third way, you know, centrist Democrat. And it always takes like a Democrat to do all the things that the Republicans were always salivating to do.
Yes.
You know, like Obama increased mass incarceration. He deregulated the media. He deregulated the banks. He got through NAFTA. I mean, this is all these horrible policies that have had these horrible effects happened under a Democratic president. Well, Obama was about to continue it by making cuts to Social Security.
Yeah.
And he was doing it with this wonky thing that he thought nobody would know by like changing the index that it was your Social Security increases were tied to. So instead of it being the cost of living, it was the change CPI. You know,
Yeah.
you hear that and you start to snooze, right? But that would have been an effective decrease in Social Security payments to seniors. And who was behind that commission? Who was advising that commission was the Peterson Foundation. Pete Peterson, the founder of the Blackstone Group, who we now know is the largest landlord in America. They bought up all the foreclosed houses for a song, and they are now renting them out. And unlike I covered a housing protest at another one of these corporate landlords, Equity Residential, where they're kicking people out. Unlike a mom and pop landlord, if you go to them and you say, oh, I lost my job, or I had an unexpected medical expense, I'm going to be late for the rent for a month, is it okay? And that landlord is an understanding person and they say it's okay. These corporate landlords are going to evict you right away so they
Yeah.
can bring in someone new and raise the rent. So the Blackstone Group, you know, Pete Peterson has been on a personal mission for 30 years, literally 3 decades, to defund Social Security, to privatize it. And it was his foundation that was advising Obama's cat food commission. And if it weren't for Jan Schakowsky and Javier Becerra, and the recommendations weren't unanimously accepted, that would have happened. But Pete Peterson also had a news company. It was called the Fiscal Times. And I remember at that period in history, the Washington Post was running stories with the byline saying the Fiscal Times as if it was some objective news service, and it was really Pete Peterson's propaganda to
Yeah,
try
it's
to
just a right-wing propaganda
yes,
rag. They're just
yes.
putting out his
So
opinion.
yes, so this is what you have. How do you even determine that these legacy newspapers, like the Washington Post, which is now owned by Jeff Bezos, who has a $600 million contract with the CIA, or the New York Times, which was the one who had Judith Miller reporting on all the weapons of mass
Yeah,
destruction. If your legacy papers can't even be uh, depended on to provide the real news, how can you depend on anything else? It's like it's a free for all. So your question, I don't really know, but this is the quote from Mark Warner that I just wanted to read, and then I'll shut up. He said, today's disclosure, and this was, let me see, this was when Facebook shut down a series of accounts. Today's disclosure is further evidence that the Kremlin continues
oh
to exploit platforms like Facebook to sow division and spread disinformation. I also expect Facebook, along with other platform companies, will continue to identify Russian troll activity and to work with Congress, dot, dot, dot. And then this was a story in which Facebook stated it did not know the source of all the pages.
yeah,
They might be Russian, or they just might be Warner's idea of sowing division.
yeah.
And then Taibbi says, "Are we comfortable with that range of possibilities?" Well, I'm not,
I'm
because
not either, and
I
that's precisely my
sow
point.
division. I sow division. You sow division. Jimmy Dore sows division. You know, we're
Well,
sowing
yeah.
division.
Well, and that's kind of my point. The all of this, to some degree, is most things, many things from the political space are used as pretext for other things. Like he can't say, I don't want my political opponents from the left hitting me and dinging me from the left. So I need to say it's the Russians. In that article from the World Socialist website, one of the things they noted was, for the most part, blacks being shot in Baltimore wasn't the fact that they were shot. It was the Russians. Like all of the cases that they were making in Congress as they were browbeating the tech companies boiled down to, we were blameless. It was all the Russians. The Russians did all of this. They're sowing the seeds. Here's the thing. The former FBI source, the guy that was in the well of Congress making the point that revolutions or civil wars are started by this stuff. It's not this stuff that starts civil wars. Like, this is usually when you see civil wars, you're talking about something, some kind of division in the society itself, some kind of chaos. But the chaos was driven in the society itself. It wasn't something that was external to the society. In our particular situation, the income inequality and everything else, the half of the country either being poor or working on this hamster wheel, that's not external. Like, that's in-house. That's something that's created in-house by the conditions on the ground in-house. And just one last point. This idea of one of the good things that Obama and Eric Holder did do, they documented police abuse. And they said, here it is. They literally documented it. So this idea that it wasn't, it was purely the Russians that was causing African Americans to be pissed off at the fact that they were being shot or manhandled by cops, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. But it doesn't matter if it's nonsense. The only thing you need is a political fig leaf. And a political fig leaf in this case are the Russians. And that's what they're using.
Right. And so that's how I think they're scaring these tech companies into doing their bidding. And one final thing that I want to say about this before we move on, which goes full circle to why I wanted to do this show, is my concern about the progressives. And I'm talking about Bernie Sanders progressives now, who are swallowing this stuff about how good it is to censor Alex Jones, in the same way they're swallowing all this propaganda about Russia. There's a lot of them out there. And what happened in this one group was, when somebody dared to bring forth the viewpoint that you and I are bringing forth, that this might be a slippery slope and actually dangerous, they banned them from the group.
Nice.
So that was like
nice.
such delicious irony as far as censoring viewpoints that you disagree with. I mean, I feel like I want to leave this group now, because if that's what their moderators are okay with doing, this is not.
I mean, that's amazing. They're essentially fascists. Like, ultimately, well, it depends on your definition of fascist, if you're talking about states, but you know what I mean. They're in a group someone deviates from their opinion, they're not deviating saying anything racist, hateful, sexist, belligerent, none of that. I disagree with this opinion. You're out of here, buddy. You're being you're being disruptive to the group. That's amazing. That's
Yeah, and
completely amazing.
it started out with this one woman who actually turns out to be a Bernie Sanders campaign staffer. I was shocked. Young woman. I saw her picture, so she doesn't have the kind of perspective about this.
Yeah.
But she was saying, I just want to put this out there because I'm not sure, I'm right on this. But there's this person who I thought I knew very well, and she's for Medicare for all and free public college, and she hates the income inequality and all this stuff. But she thought it was a bad thing about Alex Jones getting banned. So I unfriended her. What do you think of that?
Wow.
And then people were
That's
piling
amazing.
on. Right. And
Like, that's breathtaking. That perspective is breathtaking to me. Like because you try to put yourself in the headspace of saying what is true in this person's worldview to allow them to get to the point of saying, yes, it is perfectly okay to unfriend somebody because they have a different point of view on this particular issue. That's amazing.
I know. That's
amazing.
That's why we're in our own little bubbles and we're speaking to ourselves, and it's very dangerous. So now let's move on to the next subject, which is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. As you may or may not know,
yes.
She was in Los Angeles on Thursday and Friday. And I was part of a group of maybe about 12, 15 people that spent about 2 weeks putting together an itinerary for her on Thursday.
Nice.
And she asked to speak to activists. She wanted to meet grassroots activists in LA to learn about the issues that we were working on. So we met, and last week we were meeting for, every night. It was like a big production, this group. We formed this breakfast where we had 50 organizers and activists from all the different issues in the room. Then she took a quick tour of Skid Row, and then she had a lunch fundraiser where the tickets were $27 and $10 for students. We had some $10 student senior tickets available at the door. But basically, we picked too small of a venue because it seated 500 and it sold out within the first day.
That's amazing.
And at that event, for the first hour, we talked about the three main issues that are important for California. One, a public bank, because we were able to get the city council to start the process to divest from Wells Fargo. And that goes hand in hand with, well, where are they going to put their money? All the other banks are just as bad. We need a public bank. So we've got this big movement to have a public bank, and it's on the ballot in November that we have to change the city charter so that we can establish a public bank. So that was one issue. Then there's this issue of firing Jackie Lacey or getting her to resign because she's the DA and she hasn't prosecuted one single cop who has killed unarmed African Americans from the back with no, provocation. I mean, this one case where the police commission recommended that he be prosecuted, the police chief recommended he be prosecuted, and she still did not prosecute. So they want to get rid of her, and they're also trying to stop a $3.5 billion jail expansion plan. And then the third issue, which is coming up on the ballot, is to repeal Costa-Hawkins, which basically froze rent control for any building that was constructed after 1978. So it's really, rents are too damn high, and we have a huge coalition. And so basically we used her coming to LA to bring 500 people into a room to hear about our issues. And that was, not only was that okay with her, that was what she wanted. And of course, the Hollywood Reporter had to write this article saying, oh, she didn't meet with any of the big Hollywood donors, Jeffrey Katzenberg, David Geffen, all these, she just wanted to. And they were so pejorative the way they put it. They said, oh, and she went to this rally sponsored by #OccupyICE, which was just one of many organizations that sponsored her.
Yeah.
So here she is, an organizer and an activist, coming to Congress with this orientation, wanting to start a progressive slate in Congress of, people that are like her, wanting to bring other people into Congress, which is why she was stumping for Brent Welder and, Cori Bush and other Justice Democrats, and she can't cut a break. I mean, the establishment, we already know the right wing is assaulting her as a socialist, but I actually heard Erin Burnett on CNN calling her, a progressive socialist. Like they use that word as a cudgel,
Yeah.
it's code for not somebody you want to have in Congress. So when I saw that the Worldwide Socialist website was attacking her from the extreme left, I'm like, this woman can't cut a break. Why don't you describe, because you've been reading them, what you've been reading.
They've every other day there's been a hit piece on her. Like, look, from their standpoint, she's not socialist. Like, this woman is calling herself a democratic socialist, and the woman is not a socialist. And ultimately, it seems their ire goes from there. Now, to be fair, like you said, she's a democratic, she's a social democrat. She's not a democratic socialist. Fair enough. But from their standpoint, and to some degree, they're right. The public doesn't know that. The public doesn't know the difference. The public sees the term socialist. And in their mind, it's like soy milk being, mistaken for real milk. It's like, that's not real milk. That's soy milk. That's not a real socialist. That woman's a classic Democrat. That woman is a classic Democrat. I've never heard her talk about nationalizing the railways. I never heard her say anything about nationalizing the energy markets, both of which I think would be perfectly right. She has a very specific plan that she's outlined, and she has not deviated from that one iota to the left or to the right. She's been very clear on it. The only thing that she has wobbled on was the Palestinian thing, this occupation thing for Israel. But they hit her as she's not a socialist. She's not a socialist. She's not a socialist enough. And with a very specific point, that nothing that she's talking about is going to ever get accomplished through the Democratic Party. That ultimately she is pissing in the wind, to take a reference that I'm not quite sure it works in this one. But she's essentially in an organization that is diametrically against the changes that she says she wants to implement. And not just that, but the very fact of the reforms that she wants to implement is just a way of essentially hitting and kneecapping any real overt reforms that can take place in a society. Because in their minds, socialism requires these kind of big transformative things. And what FDR did stemmed any kind of real significant change in the society itself. They essentially think she's a poser. She's not a real thing. And they're
or if they want to be more generous, they're saying she's getting co-opted now.
Or that's the other thing. Yeah.
But and they're also saying that Democratic Socialists of America are not really socialist either, that they're just an organ of the Democratic Party, which is so far from the truth.
Yeah,
I mean, it is true. Because I know DSA people here, and they're all socialist in their orientation. Now, Kyle Kulinski, and we should put this in the comments. Kyle Kulinski did an excellent video in which he described the difference between democratic socialism, which does call for the expropriation of private property, and social democracy, social democrat. And basically said that Bernie Sanders and AOC call themselves democratic socialists when they're really not. They're actually social democrats or FDR-style Democrats.
Yeah.
Which basically, as you were alluding to before, FDR saved capitalism by staving off, which was what was a very popular socialist movement in the 30s. Very popular socialist movement, very popular labor movement. The labor movement was very scrappy back then. They were not afraid to use their ultimate tool, which is the strike. And I will say that the Worldwide Socialist website, I had Jerry White from that publication on my show to talk about the teachers' strikes, because they did some great reporting on how the teachers, who did organize on Facebook, by the way, the rank and file teachers in all of those states organized those strikes. And then the union leadership came in and forced them to settle before the demands were even met. And that's what these unions are like now. They're afraid to use the strike, and they're afraid to go all the way, because the union leaders are on the same level as the politicians, and they don't want to lose their access. It's like Randy Weingarten, who is the head of the American Federation of Teachers, who was on the stage of the Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C. And when I was live streaming that, I was muttering into my stream, oh, this woman's no progressive. She's just up there posing because she endorsed Hillary, even though the rank and file of the teachers wanted Bernie.
Yeah.
Well, she endorsed Hillary because she and Hillary are personal friends, and she was expecting to be named education secretary. And that's how it works. It's the same thing with these organizations. Like Cecile Richards was the head of Planned Parenthood until recently. She was making $750,000 a year as a
Wow.
head of a nonprofit, okay? And they can't even, their average worker makes 35,000, and one of their affiliates is suing the union because suing the workers because they're trying to form a union. Can you imagine? They have enough money to pay Cecile Richards 750,000 a year, but they don't want their workers to unionize, and
That's
they
amazing.
don't support single payer. They came out against single payer in Colorado. They came out against single payer in California. And why is that? Because some of their big donors are major health insurance companies.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
amazing.
So I don't trust big business, big labor, big government, big unions. I believe in local, small,
Well,
grassroots.
Would that put Planned Parenthood out of business? Would Medicare for All put Planned Parenthood out of business?
Well, I also thought that, and I posed that as a comment on my Facebook page, and people were saying no because they're a nonprofit healthcare provider, and it's not going to put any providers out of business because single payer is really just who does the paying. So, but I
Fair
don't
enough.
really know how that would
Yeah.
work because it really, if it's considered, if women's reproductive health care is rolled into Medicare for all, like here it was in California, we
Yeah.
wanted to have vision, we wanted to have dental, we wanted to have mental health, we wanted to have chiropractic, we
Should
wanted to
all be
have
included. Yeah.
home health care, all this stuff. I don't know the answer, and I could find out and maybe put it in the comments about did we have to exclude abortion just to get it passed?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
that's a good point. God, that's a good point. That's a
yeah,
good point. That's a
yeah,
good point. Because you may have
yeah,
somebody, willing to shoot themselves on the floor of the well of Congress in order to prevent something like that from going through. Like some just extreme.
yeah,
Some people are very extreme on this.
yeah.
That's a good point. In which case, Planned Parenthood wouldn't be going anywhere. However, if it was included, everything would already be included under the thing. That's a good point. I don't know. It's possible Planned Parenthood wouldn't be going anywhere regardless. So that's a good
Well,
point.
the other thing I want to mention about AOC, okay, so she was here in Los Angeles, and one of the organizers posted on his Facebook page, "Be nice if we can stop focusing on her. Why didn't she or endorse any of our local candidates?" And I know the answer to that because she is being pilloried for every step that she makes,
Yes.
including
Everything she says.
endorsements. I mean,
Everything
I
she
don't
says.
know if you're familiar with Angry Black Lady on Twitter.
Yeah, I am not.
Okay, her name is Imani Gandhi, and she was one of those people that, kept dissing Bernie for being an old white guy.
Yeah.
And she is now realizing that I see AOC as the younger, darker Bernie.
Oh
They can't
God. Okay.
they can't they can't go after her for identity politics, right? So what they do is they're going after her endorsements. And this woman writes, simple question. I like AOC, but why is she endorsing Brett Welder over Sharice David, the Native American gay woman?
Oh
So
God.
again,
It has
identity
nothing to do
politics.
with their identity. Like Jesus Christ. We're going to get to the Kamala Harris thing, but there is a fundamental misunderstanding in politics that just because you vote someone that represents a color or looks like something, it's not the same thing as them doing something. Like any like it's like saying voting for Ben Carson is going to do something awesome, for whatever Ben Carson is getting in office for. It's nonsense. Ben Carson is going to represent the interests of a different class. He's not going to represent the interests of African Americans or the majority of African Americans. It's not going to come close. It's like, look at what he's doing as housing secretary. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm intervening.
You're exactly what you said is exactly what she answered, because Sharice Davids won't support Medicare for all. So it's about the policies.
Yeah.
And it's more important what her policy is on racial justice than whether she's black or not,
Yes. Yeah.
And like Susan Sarandon said, I don't vote with my vagina. So it doesn't matter that she's a woman. If she's going to be bad on issues that affect women, which are economic issues, you know. So yeah, that's the thing. She just
That's
can't
funny.
win no matter what she does. And so they basically told me that she's not going to be endorsing any local candidates. She has to be, and similar to what they were complaining about in the Worldwide Socialist website, that she's speaking in platitudes.
Yeah.
She's speaking not in platitudes, she's speaking from principles. Like she said in the Palestinian interview, the way everybody portrayed that, I thought it was going to be so horrible. And I watched the whole thing, and no, she said, I support the two-state solution,
Good.
which you can make an argument that we can't have a two-state solution because of the settlements. There's no more contiguous land
Right.
for a Palestinian state.
Right.
But basically, she admitted, she says, I don't know about this issue. This is not an issue that comes up in my community.
You are giving this a beautiful and glowing yada yada. we're going to have a go on this one. This is an interview that she had with the conservative when she was, I think it wasn't Firing Line. That's what it was. Firing Line. Is this the conversation you're talking about?
I think so. And she said, I'm coming at this place from a place of humanism and concern for the oppressed.
Yes.
And she repeated these comments at the breakfast because we invited a young leader from the Palestinian youth movement to come and ask her a question. And he asked her, and she said, I need to learn from you. I'm coming from a place of a person of color, a Puerto Rican woman who was, oppressed. And she answered that also to a guy from the American Indian movement. And she named the native tribe in Puerto Rico that was completely wiped out. So she has an understanding from her own personal experience. And this is how she relates to other causes. It's not because she's ticking off the boxes and she's trying to get the endorsement of this group and that group, like when Hillary goes to Flint.
Yeah, I don't think that. I don't think she's ticking off the boxes.
Hillary never goes back to Flint, so she could give a shit about the water. But you know that Alexandria cares about the Palestinians because it's coming from a place of compassion, which is where everything is coming from with her, and a place of morality. I mean, her quote where she says, nobody should be too poor to live, is an incredible quote.
Look, I like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So let's put that in the box. Let's put that pin in that first. And I know the interview that you're talking about. I would not describe it in those bland terms. I thought it was somewhat of a train wreck, at least from the standpoint of that question. Let me explain why. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is now this kind of figurehead, whether she wants it or not. And she has a clear tweet on her page, unequivocal about how she feels about what's taking place in Palestine. And she was very clear. Will Democrats stand up for what's taking place over there? This is a massacre, etc. This is an occupation. We shouldn't allow this. She was very clear, unapologetic, unequivocal, very clear. You knew exactly what she was talking about when you looked at the tweet that they were referencing. And she answered the question. I thought she started off perfect. This is my experience as a person in this country. Because look, all of us, to some degree, are just talking about our experiences. At least whether what we say, for the most part, is indicative of what was put in us or what we put in ourselves. But either way, it's in us. It's the second point. When the woman asked her, you said occupation. And the moment that she said the word, Ocasio froze. She literally froze. She was frozen when she was asked the word occupation. And it took her a good second or two before she was like, in that moment, she had lost the thread. The person asked her something critically, not necessarily being belligerent about it, but asked her the word critically, in which case Ocasio shriveled away from essentially being affirmative in regards to what she was talking about. Eventually slacking away, saying, I don't know enough about this topic. Now, fair enough.
Which is humility.
It is humility, but it's also backing away from something that she considered somebody was being critical. And in a case where, being in the United States, where a lot of the sites we just showed, where they were taking down Palestinian sites, you can imagine people are somewhat sensitive about this idea of representing Palestinian rights. I don't necessarily think she completely, threw them to the wind, nothing like that. But she definitely demurred when somebody was asking her about it critically. That's all. The other stuff, I agree with you on. This particular one, no. I saw the tweet and I saw her comment. I watched the entire interview and I thought, oh God, that was a bad answer. I just thought it was a bad answer.
Well, I would invite you to listen to the answer that she gave the young Palestinian and maybe even talk to him and see, what he thought of her answer, because I mean, she doesn't know
wait, and
enough about.
just let me make a point. Here's the thing. I think her real answer is what she put in the tweet. I think that's the real answer. I think her real answer is this is a travesty of justice. This is an open air ghetto. This shouldn't happen. I think from a political standpoint, she's like, oh man, should I say this? And what is going to be the political impact of me saying this? I think the moment that she got elected, like you said, she was being deemed on everything that she said. 28-year-old getting into political process, and all of these people, all eyes are on her, and everything that she says, she's being picked apart. She's being hit from the right, she's being hit from the left, and it's where should I stand where I'm not going to get hit?
And the center, the right, the left, and the center.
Yeah, yeah,
well,
she's
anyway,
getting hit everywhere. So it's like, where do I stand?
Uh-oh. Lost you. Hello?
Talking about, I agree with Lauren on pretty much everything she said in regards to Ocasio. She has been getting hit. She has been getting attacked, left, right, center, somewhere in between. I just wish she was stronger. I wish she didn't demur on that issue. That's all. I wish she didn't demur.
I lost you.
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Yeah, I lost you.
You lost me? I think we lost you, or is it the other way around?
No, because I hung up because I didn't see your face. I just saw your icon. Your avatar, whatever they call
it. Oh no, that was you losing. That was you fading out. Sometimes when it fades out, it does that. Like I think the last time I was on, I saw the person's avatar fade out. I don't know. I don't know which one. But I never lost the stream, and so for the most part, the stream just came up. Eventually, I saw you pop back on.
I couldn't hear you, and I couldn't see you, so it was useless.
Oh, no worries. Well, you're back, and you're here. You're back, and you're here.
Right, so do you want to segue to the Kamala Harris thing? I have the quote up. I can read it.
Yes. Go for it.
Okay, so this is Kamala Harris at Netroots Nation. And for those people who don't know me, I have a little hashtag for her, which is hashtag counterfeit Kamala. And the counterfeit is spelled with a K. And I come up with these little alliterative hashtags. I also have bought Booker.
Wait. If you send me the quote, I'll put it up so people can see what we're talking about.
Oh, well, it's in the article. Well, it's in the Free Beacon, actually. Let me see.
And so, by the way, there is a case against Twitter, or at the very least there was. This is Breitbart, even and I don't want to use Breitbart as a source, but for this
right, one. So I'm going to send this to you in Facebook Messenger.
Yes, that works.
Okay.
This is the case I was talking about earlier, right here. Free speech suit aims to end Twitter's political censorship. A group of free speech lawyers filed the most serious legal challenge yet to Twitter's censorship policies Tuesday in San Francisco County Superior Court, seeking a ruling preventing Twitter from banning users purely on the basis of their views in the political associations. So I don't know the outcome of this. This was back in, what was it? February 2018. February 2018.
All right. Well,
I remember
send that to me or something, because I want to follow up on that.
And I remember seeing something about this where people were talking about it, but I don't remember the outcome of it. That's the only, it's that stuff. It's like the stuff that floats behind the scenes in your mind where you see it, but kind of not see it. All right, so let's see. Let's show the Kamala Harris one, and let's flip the screen so people can see what we're talking about.
Well, just to give some background, I call her counterfeit Kamala because I think she's running for president and she's stealing Bernie Sanders' issues. You know, She was the first one to come out for Medicare for all. She's doing all sorts of other things that she didn't do at all as senator. She didn't do at all as attorney general. And, you know, they intercepted a famous story on how her staff, when she was attorney general, recommended that she prosecute Steve Mnuchin's bank, One West Bank, for foreclosure fraud, and she didn't do it. And the reason was he contributed to her campaign for attorney general. And then after she didn't prosecute him, he contributed to her campaign for senator. And of course, Steve Mnuchin is now our Treasury Secretary under Trump. And he should be behind bars, like so many other of Trump's cabinet officials. But Kamala Harris is running for president, and she's stealing Bernie Sanders' things. And she was invited to speak at Netroots Nation, as was Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and AOC. And she starts to talk about identity politics. And she's talking about it in the context of the election of Doug Jones and how Black women made it possible, and that we should respect the leadership, and saying, you know, we shouldn't just be thanking them for electing progressive leaders. In 2018, we should be electing women of color as those leaders, okay? Setting herself up for being elected in 2020. And then she says, I have a problem, guys, with that phrase, identity politics, because let's be clear, when people say that, it's a pejorative. The phrase is used to divide, and it is used to distract. Its purpose is to minimize and marginalize issues that impact all of us. It is used to try to shut us up. And she said that the phrase is used when talking about issues of race, gender, sexual orientation, and civil rights. And yes, we are talking about those issues, and we won't shut up, and we won't be silenced. We won't be silenced about immigrants' rights. We won't be silenced about a woman's right to control her own body. We will not be silent about equal opportunity and equal justice under the law. These issues they are trying to diminish and demean are the very issues that will define our identity as Americans. And so here's the thing. She is completely misusing the word identity politics. We all support those issues.
Yes, right. I'm sitting here thinking I'm like, yeah, there's no problem with those issues. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to.
That's not what identity politics is. That's not what they do when they play identity politics. What they do when they play identity politics is exactly what Imani Gandhi did, angry Black lady on Twitter, when she asked AOC why she was supporting a white man over a Native American lesbian woman. That's identity politics, and that's what they do. The centrist Democrats do to divide us. And that's how they, wait a minute, let me just finish my point, because this is what the Democratic Party has been doing so that they don't have to deal with the fact that they're just as bad as the Republicans when it comes to economic issues. They're good on women's rights. They're good on gay rights. They're good on, you know, civil rights, presumably. But on the economic issues, which impact, that disproportionately affect people of color more, that you know, that's the problem. You know, war is an issue that affects, you know, they talked about, and this is why Michelle Alexander wrote such a great article on why Blacks should not be supporting Hillary Clinton, because all of Hillary's policies and how they deleteriously impacted women and children, like war and like sanctions, you know, and like mass incarceration and ending welfare reform, which was Bill Clinton's policy that she supported. Okay, so that's what identity politics is. It's bringing up, you know, you should elect this person because they're white, because they're Black, because they're a woman, because they're gay, not all these issues. And I just found that whole speech so appalling and totally used to confuse people to vote for her in 2020.
Yeah, I agree with you. This idea, there's nothing stopping somebody who's representing identity to also deal with economics. Nothing at all. And, you know, I would make the argument that you require both. It's like, yes, this person is free, but this person doesn't have access to anything. So this person is debt-ridden, in poverty, not having access to healthcare, education, or any of these things. But hey, they're free. You're not being discriminated against from the standpoint of this person hating you for your skin tone. You require those things as a human being. This idea of any kind of this social thing, meaning our interactions with one another. Yes, I don't necessarily want people to be belligerent and all this other stuff. By the same token, if you're talking about any level of economic freedom or any kind of liberation, you need to talk about the economic sphere also. You need both. There's not one or the other. It's somewhat of a false argument to act as if it's one or the other, meaning someone bringing up identity politics. I get annoyed at the identity politics thing because ultimately Democrats do it all the time. This guy is black, and because this guy is black, you should be perfectly okay with voting for this guy. This guy is Asian. Crowley did it. If you go back to Crowley's speech, Crowley says, I put this Asian American in office, and I put the first Indian, Arab, Asian American into this particular office. Like this kind of just weird combination that he was coming up with as human beings. This gay human being that just so happened to be, Jewish American or whatever. He was coming up with these names, and Ocasio-Cortez kind of made this really good point. It has nothing to do with their race, dude. It has everything to do with what they do. It's like saying I should vote for Obama because he's black as opposed to voting for Bernie Sanders. Which one would represent my interest more? That clearly would be Bernie Sanders. It has nothing to do with the race. This identity politics stuff is aggravating because in the very play where she's defending identity politics, she's using identity politics. You know what I mean? It's this weird irony. And by the way, Doug Jones, just so we're clear, those black women coming together to put Doug Jones in.
He's been voting like a Republican.
This is what he's been voting. I mean, look at his voting record.
Yeah.
He has a 52% score in voting with Trump. 52% of the time when he's making a vote, he's voting for Trump.
Wow.
It's Trump's score. How often does Doug Jones vote in line with Trump's position? 52.6%. Right. Now, you can make a case that says a Republican would have voted much higher, but by the same token, why is Doug Jones voting like Donald Trump anyway? And do you believe that these votes were beneficial to the black women that voted him in? Do you really believe that? I mean, this talk of look at all these black women getting Doug Jones in office, that's great, but look at what it got him. Somebody's voting 52% with Donald Trump, who's supposed to be the apocalypse himself. Yeah, I don't like this. And just to put a fine point on it, I don't use identity politics as a pejorative, except when used in cases that we're talking about. Like this thing of this person is black, so vote this person in. No, what is a person's policies? Yeah. By the same token, if we're talking about the 60s and we're talking about identity politics, then yeah, you are talking about identity politics, but you're not using it in the spectrum of people just voting for somebody for their race.
Right. Well, representation is important. Like if you have more women in office, you're going to have people more sympathetic to women's issues, but they have to be the right women. Like,
right. It's not blindly. I guess that's my point. It's not, I want more African-Americans in office, but I want them in office when they're representing my interests. I don't want it to just be blindly voting for somebody just because they're white, black, African, or whatever.
Yeah, like Ted Lieu right now is supporting 6 women, and he's having a fundraiser. He's my congressman, liberal voting record, but he's gone off the deep end with Trump. He brags about how he out-tweets Trump, and every day you can't go on his Twitter feed. And he's got, a couple 100,000 followers now, so he's not going to stop. It's working. Yeah. He's building a brand as being Trump's chief antagonist. And unfortunately, he's not supporting any of the other issues that he used to support. Like he had a bill before Trump that we should not fund Saudi Arabia anymore as long as they're committing war crimes in Yemen. Has he talked about that issue at all? No. He's just Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Mueller, Jared Kushner, Manafort, this and that. Anyway, he's doing a fundraiser in Beverly Hills for these 6 women that are the CIA-inspired candidates. I'm sure you've heard of them. Yeah, they're all veterans, and they're supported by Vote Veterans, but they either worked at the CIA or one of them worked for the trade representative that was pushing the TPP. The other one, I forget what her job title was, but one of her main job functions was promoting corporations. I mean, can you get any more like centrist than this? And so, yeah, I mean, I just want to read one thing because I like to give my Facebook followers some credit when they're articulate. This guy, Nenad Lovrick, I never met him. I don't know where he lives, but I thought he was so articulate. He said, unfortunately, identity politics has been hijacked by corporate centrists to exclude class and anything to do with economic justice.
Yes.
A living wage, universal health care, free public college, tackling inequality. These all are women's, people of color, trans,
Yes.
immigrant issues, as well as they actually disproportionately affect these groups. True, these are not exclusively minority identity issues, as they also affect the vast majority of the rest of the population, but therein lies their universal unifying power, 99% versus 1%,
Yes.
which is why corporate identitarians and guardians of the capitalist status quo, like Harris, only want people focused on issues of diversity and representation and parity. Example, fighting for women to be paid the same as men or blacks the same as whites is certainly a worthy cause, but if neither is going to be paid a living wage, or conversely, if both are going to be paid 1,000 times more than the average employee, is that justice?
Yeah.
Surely parity is not enough. We need both minority majority parity and across the board justice. And then he writes, I know I'm going to get it from the strict identitarians for writing this, but anyway.
No, he's right. No, he's
right?
Everything he said in that piece is right. I agree with everything he said. I even love the way he said it. He's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. I mean, look, it is an easy position to defend, to say I'm not racist, sexist, or homophobic or anti-Semitic. And if you don't vote for me, you are. Like this bizarre the positioning that you're taking, like you said in the piece. I'm fighting to make sure that each person, woman, gets paid what a man is making. Well, that's a decent position to take. Who's going to be against that particular position? Missing the point that the argument of, well, wait a minute, but what are they getting paid?
Yeah.
Like, one argument gives more context to the other argument. He's right. I like what he's saying. He's right. He's absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, I think we've over extended our hour, but I wanted to just talk to you a little bit.
You're
Like,
fine. You're fine.
I'm taking over the hosting of the Robust Opposition here, and I want to just ask you before we end. You told me earlier that you and your wife are going traveling for 8 months. I wonder if you can describe to your viewers where you're going and why you're going and what you plan to cover and what we can expect to see from you in the coming
yes.
months.
We are. So both of us, I like to travel. I've always loved to travel. I used to go traveling by myself, just kind of walking the world. When my wife and I got together, one of the things that she kind of started to hitch her wagon in this case, and both of us started to go places. So one of the things that we wanted to do was, if we got to the point where both of us can work remotely, to just go. I just want to go. And that was the thought. And last year, she got to the point where her job allowed her to work remotely. And I started doing this much, much more, to the point where this allows me to essentially do this. And so we decided to go. Now, the first place we're hitting is Africa. We're going to Nairobi, Nairobi, Kenya. I'm still going to do shows. That's never going to change, but the shows will be in different locations. And hopefully I can stop to get some of the historical context in each of the places that I go to, since I am a history buff and I love that stuff. From Nairobi, Egypt, Portugal, what was next? Portugal, I think it was London, London to Germany, but it's difficult to kind of plan out an entirety of a trip just from everywhere you go. So what we ended up doing, or my strategy, is like a 2-month strategy. I look in advance in 2 months, so we always know where we're going for the next 2 months, and you get just a new horizon each time after the 2 months ends up. But so far, those are the main places: Germany, and then going around to some of the East, I guess you could say, some of the old Russian Soviet states, ending up finally in Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Cambodia. I don't know about Indonesia, Vietnam. Yes, definitely Vietnam. Absolutely Vietnam. There's a picture that I have in my head. I think it's Hulan Bay. That may be the wrong place. That may be China. But there's a picture. It's like of the top 50 places to go in the world. It's etched in my brain. I want to go to that place. And so from that place on, eventually you get to Australia, New Zealand, back to the States, to California.
Oh my God, can I come with you?
I think the trip is going to be more stressful than the closer we get to it, the more.
It's an amazing trip. You're going to places that I've never been, that I would love to go. But
I'm looking forward to it. I have this thing in my head about everything that could potentially go wrong, if that makes sense. but we're going to get a backup camera, backup computer, backup power source in case some of the places we go to don't have electricity for a period of time. And there's some kind of device that we can use in order to make sure we have Wi-Fi, where we can put a SIM card in the various locations. My wife is awesome at looking this stuff up because she panics a little bit more than I do. So she researches the stuff in advance, like, we need this, and this. Like, great, let's do that. Let's get those.
You know what you should do? You should try to find out who the activists are in those countries and try to meet up with them and interview them. Because when I went to Cuba with Code Pink, and it was really an activist trip and so much more interesting to me than just going to like churches and art museums. We actually met with organizers and the people in the government, you know, in the Castro's government.
Oh, and man, that had been amazing.
Yeah,
I've always wanted to go to Cuba, and I think when they first opened Cuba up, there was like a major storm. I don't know if you remember this. There was like this massive storm. This was like a year or two ago that devastated some parts of the island. I don't necessarily think Cuba was devastated, but some of the other parts. That was the year that I really wanted to go, and that was the year that JetBlue had started selling tickets, and they had tickets for like a dirt cheap price. So I never got the chance to go.
Yeah, well, you know, Trump's closed it off again. It used to be anybody could travel, and now you still have to be part of an educational group or a cultural group or something like that. But anyway,
I wonder if you can do it for a show, though. Like, if you're doing a show, would that count as an educational thing? If you were doing a video,
well, you probably would have to get sponsored by some organization. I don't know. You know, maybe you could talk to Democracy Now! Or Free Speech TV or one of the progressive lefty organizations that actually is incorporated as a 501c3 that may want to, you know, sponsor you to be their correspondent. I mean, I'm sure if you send in reports and they use it on the show, why wouldn't they do it? I mean, you're not asking to be paid. Maybe you should ask to be paid. I don't know.
Yeah, but it should be fun. And our plan is, or at least my plan, is to find historical stuff of historical significance. And I like your idea of the activists. Like, find the people who are rowdy and who are trying to get stuff done in the various countries that we're going to. That should be damn interesting. Definitely in London, because I cover British politics all the time. So God, you have no idea how much I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, in general, it should be interesting. It should be interesting.
All right, now
I don't know when I went to Egypt back in 2008 when Obama was taking office. So I haven't been there since the kind of quasi-revolution that ended up not necessarily being a revolution. But it should be interesting. And having somebody with me is even more interesting because at that point it adds complexity. Like, it's not just me saying, all right, I'm going to go to this place. It's, do we really need to go to that place? I'm not, like, my wife, when we went to Belgium, we did France and Belgium because I hate just doing one spot. If I'm near somewhere else, I like to do multiple locations, especially during the time where I was doing like a trip a year, because you only get to go once a year. You might not even go the next year. And I wanted to go to the European Parliament, and she was like, oh God, why do we have to go to European Parliament? Why do we have to do this? And she finds out it's in Belgium, which has Belgium chocolates. And in which case it was like, yeah, Belgium was a great idea. This was an awesome trip. We need to do this more often. You know, it was that type of stuff.
Exactly.
But this should be fun. This should be fun. This should be good. It should be good.
All right, my dear. Listen, do me a favor. Let me do 3 opens because I'm going to edit this onto my channel.
Go for it.
And I just want to introduce the 3 segments. Hi, this is Lauren Steiner with the Robust Opposition, and I'm here with my guest, Jamarl Thomas, and I'm actually his guest on the Progressive Soapbox. So this program is airing on both of our YouTube channels. And the first thing that we're going to be talking about in segment 1 is Twitter. No, was it Twitter that banned Alex Jones?
No. Twitter was the one that didn't ban Alex Jones. It was.
All right, let me cut.
It was
Google,
I'm going to edit this. YouTube, Apple,
Spotify.
And Spotify, yeah.
Yes. So the first topic we're going to be discussing is Facebook, YouTube, Google, Apple, and Spotify totally banning Alex Jones, and the problem with some people on the left thinking that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to do the second one. Hi, this is Lauren Steiner from the Robust Opposition. I'm back with Jamarl Thomas, my guest, and I'm his guest on the Progressive Soapbox. And we're back for our second segment, in which we're going to be talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and how she can't catch a break. She's being attacked by the Republicans, by centrist Democrats, and even the Worldwide Socialist website. And here we go for part 3. Hi, this is Lauren Steiner with the Robust Opposition, and I'm here with Jamarl Thomas from the Progressive Soapbox. I am guesting on his show. He's guesting on my show. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about Kamala Harris's remarks about identity politics at this weekend's Netroots Nation. And was she entirely honest about her description of that term, or was she using that term for her own political gain? All right, I'm going to do an outro. Thank you very much, Jamarl, for joining me.
No, I'm glad to have you. Robust Opposition, Lauren Steiner always said that woman is a pit bull, and every time I bring you on, they love to have you. So that is, you are absolutely welcome. Is there something I didn't ask that you may want to add before we close?
No, there's a million subjects I could talk about, but I really wanted to just focus on these 3 because they were extremely topical. And I'm very excited to turn this off and see actually how our progressive candidates are doing in the midterms. I think that if Abdul El Sayed pulls off this upset over Gretchen Whitmer, it's going to be a fantastic, fantastic thing. I met him. He came out to Los Angeles. He's an amazing guy. Very humble, very authentic, really wants to do the right thing. And if he could beat her with her, establishment endorsements and her big money and her insurance industry backing, by the way, I think the Intercept posted how she was recruited by the health insurance industries to run. So no wonder she doesn't support Medicare for all, right? Are you looking it up
she doesn't support Medicare for all? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Were you looking up the results to see if there are any early results?
I am curious about what happened. I got to be honest. I don't fully know about Abdul Saeed, but I hope he wins. I mean, just for the mental breakdown that you will see in the center, like the radical center.
Yeah. And Brent Welder and James Thompson in Kansas. Those are 2 other races that I've been following. And Sarah Smith in Washington State. So,
all right, Michigan primary election results, 31 minutes to go. Abdul Saeed came in second place with 34%. Gretchen Whitmer wins 50% of the votes.
Shit, they called it already?
They've called it already. The Republican one, they've called. I mean, considering he started off in 3rd place and nobody knew who he was, he looked like he just came out of nowhere. I can't believe anybody voted for Shreve Thander, or whatever his name is. That guy was a joke.
I want to say that Bernie Sanders, I've called out Bernie Sanders before, and I really want to say he came out way too late. Too late.
It was like the last week of the election of sorts. I mean, like, he didn't do great video spots and everything else for him. But like you said, it might have been at the last minute. Let's see, who was the other?
Well, now I'm disappointed.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I had hopes, even though I wasn't necessarily focused on it. There were hopes. There were hopes. There were like these little bubbling hopes of like, God, I hope he wins. Not necessarily, like, even some of these wins I hope take place just for the breaking of the mental nerves of the people who are on the other side. What's her name? Ocasio-Cortez was a big win, but World Socialist website, I think it was them, kind of made this point. She was like the only win from the standpoint of somebody on the left taking down one of the really big Democratic hitters. All right, so some of the other ones, U.S. House District 13, those are still going.
What about the Kansas ones?
Let's try Kansas. Let's see. I love election nights. All right, Kansas results.
Yeah, gee, Jamarl, we could have done a whole election night, analysis.
Who you're telling? I know, right?
We could be the Rachel Maddow and the Lawrence O'Donnell and the Chris Hayes. Unfortunately, I haven't been following these races enough to make any insightful commentary. Of course, that never stops them, right?
I was about to say the same thing. I really don't believe that these guys be following the races to that degree. I think they book up one of those things the day before and just kind of go, unless it's somebody they really care about. All right, so for Kansas, the governor, Democratic, that's still out. Oh, wait a minute. Laura Kelly, 54.2% of the vote. That's still going. Chris Kobach, that race.
Oh my God, he's the one who's responsible for the cross-check program. The one that disenfranchises all the black and brown people.
He's winning. Like it's close. It's 40.8%.
Secretary of State? Secretary of State?
A Republican candidate. This is governor? No, this is governor.
He's fucking running for governor?
He's running for fucking governor.
Oh my God.
That's terrifying.
You know about the cross-check program, right?
Yeah. Interstate cross-check. I mean, to some degree, you can make an argument that the reason Trump is in office is Operation Cross-Check. The number of blacks that they were able to get rid of in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Yeah. I am firmly aware. Using last names in order to get rid of certain people. Of course, you know, there's a statistical model of a representative of how many people of a particular race have a particular last name, and leaving those people up.
Like they'll take like a Robert M. Martinez and a Robert Y. Martinez.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this guy's voting twice. It's like, but he has a different middle name. Yeah, we don't know that. That could be one of those crafty Mexicans adding a Y to the middle name so they can vote twice in our elections. This was nonsense. This was utter nonsense. All right, so who is the other person?
We're looking at Brent Welder.
So Brent Welder
in Kansas
Brent Welder is winning 37.5%. Sharice Davids, it's 33.3%. So he's out.
That's a nail biter.
It's close.
What percentage of the vote? What percentage?
Less than 1% voting.
Oh well.
It's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing yet.
Yeah.
Nothing yet.
How about James Thompson?
Let's see. James Thompson is winning 35% of the vote, 66 to 36. He's winning. Like he's beating the stuffing out of whoever he's running against. Laura.
Oh, good. Because I know my friend Janice Thompson, who was on the Cuba trip with me, has been volunteering for him.
Really?
He ran for it was Paul Ryan? No, who was Kansas? Some guy, Pompeo. He ran for Pompeo.
Oh, geez. Mike Pompeo.
Yeah, because Pompeo was tapped for what is he? Secretary of State now?
He's Secretary of State, unfortunately. Yeah,
I can't keep track of Trump's roving.
It's hard to keep track of them. I mean, it's like they don't stay in office for the moment that you have a mental note of one, he's gone. It's like Tillerson. All right, Rex Tillerson. I got Tillerson in my head. Then Tillerson's out. Then you have Pompeo. Who the hell? Like, God damn it, Pompeo. All right, now
Pompeo was CIA.
Yeah, right. Pompeo was head of the CIA. And they switched now to the other woman who was essentially a torturer.
Yeah, Gina Haspel.
Yeah, I like elections when I know like the people who are going to be in those elections, but still. Yeah, I did hope the other cat win. So.
Yeah.
All right. Laura Steiner, keep kicking ass, keep doing what you're doing, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Jamarl. Anytime, and I hope to do. When are you taking your trip?
It's not till September. We don't leave until September. I mean, somebody said, "Did Jamal just win the lottery?" No, didn't win the lottery. Believe it or not, it is cheaper to live in some of the other places. The problem is when people decide. Oftentimes, people are trying to take trips with keeping a house, with keeping an apartment, with keeping a car, So it's right off the bat, whatever you are making, it's $1,000 or $2,000 right off the bat. But you're just putting down, everything else is on top of that: food, clothing, shelter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you take away the other part, the house and whatever, that's money that you, for the most part, can use for travel. The problem is if you maintain the house. The reason why we're living in my mom's house for this 2 months is so we don't necessarily take on another house, another property. That way, the money that you're paying for rent is essentially money that you just pay for rent. You're just somewhere else. That works, but especially in Africa, that works, especially in Asia. It gets rocky when you get to Europe, but the money that you save in Africa and Asia is the money that you apply to Europe. It works. It works. Believe it or not, it works. And it's not all that expensive. My wife, she was she was in some kind of travel group, and the person was like, "Yeah, this trip costs $4,000," and she hates stuff like that. She's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they're paying $4,000 for this." She's like, "We can open a business and we can charge trips for what they actually cost." You know, it's not that expensive. It's people think those things are far more expensive than what they think they are, and I think to some degree that's a barrier for people doing it or just
Well,
traveling in general.
you need to also have the time and the freedom, and her being able to work remotely, and
Yeah,
your flexibility with your show. Anyway, thanks for coming on to discuss these important topics with me. Hopefully, we
absolutely.
can do another show together before you go on your trip.
Anytime, and even when I'm gone, it's still nothing changes. I mean, for the most part, our schedules are probably going to end up in sync where we're working just throughout the course of the day and puttering
Yeah.
about it in the evening.
All right. Well,
So
if I can figure
nothing will
out, if I
change.
can figure out, you could even be a correspondent, because I had a guest from Gaza come on her
Yeah,
phone. So yeah, I can maybe, like, if you're posting things like on Facebook about interesting
yeah,
things that you've done or people that you've interviewed, I could have you come on as like a foreign correspondent, you know?
that works. I love that, a foreign correspondent puttering
Yes,
about in the roving.
Jamal Thomas, our man in Cairo.
That's hilarious. Oh,
All
that's
right, take
hilarious. That's
care.
hilarious. But no,
Take
I am,
care,
yeah,
Jamal.
that's fine. And look, like I said, I'm still around, and I do videos like every day. Maybe there may be 2 days where I'm off during the week, so that
Yeah.
has not going to change. So feel free.
All
All right, have a good one. Enjoy. All right,
Bye,
guys. If you
everyone.
enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support through Patreon. All right, let's end the broadcast.